The courtroom fell silent, but the weight of the judge's words cracked through the air like a lightning strike. "Remove that medal, sir. It does not belong in my courtroom." The words hung, acidic and absolute. All eyes turned toward the man, standing at the defendant's table, stoic, worn, his chest rising slowly beneath a crisp suit that seemed borrowed from a better time. The Medal of Honor gleamed against the dark fabric, not as a decoration, but as a silent testament to wars survived and sacrifices made that he did not move. His name was Samuel Ridgeway, a retired staff sergeant, a double amputee, and a man who had buried more brothers than he could count. His silence in that moment wasn't defiance. It was something deeper, something older. It was the weight of carrying entire battlefields inside his skin. The judge's gavel slammed again. "That's an order." Samuel's hand, worn and trembling from years of shrapnel and frostbite, slowly reached up, not toward the metal, but toward the edge of the table. His fingertips pressed into the wood as if to steady the ground beneath him. But the metal stayed. His silence stayed. And in that moment, the entire courtroom began to fracture, not in noise, but in something much louder: moral collapse. Samuel Ridgeway wasn't supposed to be here. He hadn't come for glory, nor for protest. He had come because a parking citation had spiraled into a confrontation that landed him in court. What the officer hadn't known, what the system hadn't cared to ask, was that Samuel had parked in a restricted zone only because he couldn't move fast enough to avoid collapsing from a pain episode caused by his prosthetics. He had needed that space. He had needed a moment. But systems are not designed for moments. They are designed for orders. When he'd arrived in court that morning, his only thought was to quietly explain, to pay whatever fine was necessary, and to return to the life he had built in the careful silence of a man who no longer expected the world to understand him. But the judge had seen the metal pinned to his chest, and somewhere deep inside his brittle pride, the judge had decided that it was a show of disrespect, a political statement, perhaps, in a courtroom that worshipped hierarchy more than humanity. "Remove it," the judge had ordered. And now, here Samuel stood, unmoving, unwelcome, unbroken. There was a time when Samuel's body had moved without pain. A time when his hands could twist the bolts of a Black Hawk helicopter faster than the stopwatch could count. He had been 23 when he was first deployed, young enough to believe he was invincible, old enough to know better. Daiti was in the valley of San Jin where he earned the medal that now drew so much contempt. His squad had been pinned down by enemy fire. 8 men trapped beneath the unrelenting hiss of bullets and the deafening echo of mortar blasts. When the call for extraction failed, Samuel, dragging a shattered leg and clutching a rifle slick with his own blood, had crawled across the dirt, 67 meters under open fire, to pull each man, one by one, back to the battered vehicle. His breath had been smoke. His skin had been fire. When the Black Hawk finally landed, there were 4 men alive who wouldn't have been if not for him. And there were 2 legs that wouldn't come home with him. That he never spoke of it. He never needed to. The medal told the story without sound. That I in the courtroom now, the judge's lips tightened. His name was Judge Harold Whitmore, a man whose life had been carefully polished, whose respect was demanded but rarely earned. "I will not ask again," Whitmore warned, his voice sharpening. "This is my courtroom. Your medal is not appropriate. Here, remove it." Samuel's breathing was steady, his face unreadable. But something ancient stirred in the courtroom walls, a quiet protest rising from the silence. Those who had come to watch, a smattering of strangers, a handful of officers, a few gray-suited attorneys, began to shift in their seats, sensing something was wrong but too timid to speak. That a young bailiff hesitated, eyes flickering between the judge and the veteran. She'd been taught to follow orders. But now, her heartbeat betrayed her training. She could feel the injustice rising like smoke. Judge Whitmore mistook the silence for compliance. "You will be held in contempt," he sneered. "Do you understand me?" Samuel's gaze, weathered and calm, finally lifted to meet the judge's. When he spoke, his voice was sandpaper against stone, soft but unmovable. "This medal," Samuel said, fingers brushing the edge of the ribbon, "is not for you to permit or deny. I wear it for those who cannot." The courtroom rippled, a quiet breath of collective reckoning. Judge Whitmore's face reddened, his authority cracking at the edges. "Remove it, or I will have you removed." Samuel's hand dropped back to the table. His silence returned, not as surrender, but as a declaration. A beat passed. Then another. And then the door at the back of the courtroom opened. A man in a dark uniform stepped in. General Marcus Hale, retired. His face was carved from the same stone as Samuel's. A man who had commanded, who had bled, who had buried his share of folded flags. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. Without a word, General Hale walked to the gallery and took a seat in the front row. Behind him, more followed, men in civilian clothes, women in quiet strength, one by one, until the gallery was filled with veterans, their jackets heavy with ribbons, their silence louder than any protest. They had come, not by summons, but by call of honor. The bailiff, the attorneys, even the officers could feel it now. The courtroom had shifted. The power had changed hands. Judge Whitmore's voice faltered, but he clung to procedure. This is improper." Samuel's hand pressed gently against his metal, not to remove it, but to steady it, as if he were anchoring the memories of those who never left San Jin. And then, from the back, a single voice broke the silence. He earned that right. It came from an older man, a wheelchair-bound Marine who had known the desert and its terrible sun. Others followed. "We all earned that right. He wears it for us. He wears it for the fallen." The judge's gavel trembled in his grasp. Authority, once absolute, now dangled from a thread. Samuel's voice, when it came, was not loud. It didn't need to be. "You may hold me in contempt," he said quietly, "but I will not hold myself in dishonor." The courtroom, still bound by law, now belonged to something greater than law, a brotherhood, a sacrifice, a history written in the marrow of men like Samuel Ridgeway. Judge Whitmore, cornered by the very silence he had tried to command, made one final attempt to salvage control. "Bailiff, remove him." But the bailiff, a young woman who had family in uniform, did not move. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "I will not." The judge's mouth opened, but no words came. General Hale rose from his seat, approached the bench with slow, deliberate steps, and placed a single folded letter on the judge's desk. It bore the seal of the Secretary of Defense. Without speaking, the general turned, walked to Samuel, and extended his hand. "Thank you for your service," he said, the words carrying the weight of every silence Samuel had ever held. Others rose to their feet, following the gesture point one by one until the entire courtroom stood, except Judge Whitmore. Surrounded by a sea of upright respect, the judge sat alone, powerless in the presence of unshakable honor. The charges against Samuel were quietly dropped. No explanation was offered, none was needed. Judge Whitmore's career, however, did not survive the public reckoning that followed. His name became synonymous with the worst kind of authority, the kind that forgets what respect is owed. Samuel Ridgeway never returned to that courtroom. He never spoke of that day that he didn't need to. His silence had already told the story. Some say real power is loud, but the loudest power that day was quiet. Sometimes the greatest battles are not fought on foreign soil, but in the spaces where dignity is quietly threatened. Sometimes the strongest protest is to simply stand. "I will not hold myself in dishonor. He wears it for us. You may hold me in contempt, but I will not hold myself in dishonor." These are not just words. They are the weight carried by those who choose silence over surrender. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in honoring silent heroes like Samuel Ridgeway, subscribe for more stories that deserve to be heard, because some medals are not worn for applause, they're worn for those who never came home.